Scooty push the little white box. So we are finishing up the 9th chapter. And we are in the section where Krishna is basically saying, your mind is drawn to that which you cherish. If it be the devas or the ancestors or whatever your idea of the good is. You may think you want to be a yogi, but the one whose mind is always thinking about fixed on God is the one who comes to the infinite. All right, what verse are we on?
29.
29. You help us out, please, Deepa.
Sure. Tamoham sarvabhuteshu na me dveshosti na priya ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham. The same am I to all beings. To me there is none hateful nor dear. But those who worship me with devotion are in me, and I am also in them.
So this seems contradictory, where he says, first of all, he's saying to everyone, but then those who worship him, who for whom he is dear, they're special? No, not at all. One of the oldest metaphors or images of God in Hinduism is Surya, sun. The sun is the same to everyone. Susili doesn't walk out of her house and the sun says, I just don't like your attitude today. I'm not going to shine on you. And then the sun doesn't turn around and say, oh, Fang, you hair looks so nice today. I'm going to shine on you more special. There's no such sun that does that. So what we need to understand is the love of God, the grace of God, the presence of God, the healing, transforming power of God is everywhere and always available. So what differs from person to person? It is your and my state of mind. So the human mind can be a conductor of spiritual force, or it can be a blockage, an insulator of it. So in the old-timey days, when you had batteries in the car with the 2 terminals and you lived in an area where there was cold weather and snow and stuff like that, you go out on a wintry morning and you try to start their car and no juice. So you open up the hood of the car and you would see corrosion around the battery terminals. So what did you do? You undid the 2 little clippy things, got out your wire brush, to get rid of the incrustation. Then you put the terminals back on, go inside the car, vroom, it starts right up. Note that the battery always had its power, but there was something impeding the flow of the electricity. The mind can impede the flow of Shakti, of the Holy Spirit, of God force, of healing power, of transforming power. Or it can be a conductor. What is it that gets in the way? Self will run riot. I may think God is omnipotent and omniscient, but he must need my help. So I'm going to try to force situations in life, control situations in life, dominate events, dominate people. I need to get my needs met. I need to have my way. This willfulness, which is fundamentally caused by spiritual ignorance. The cause of it is I do not know that God's love is a constant and always there working in my life if I let it. So what we need to do is let go of that willfulness, let go of that compulsion to dominate, to fight life. Instead, keep turning our minds to the infinite. I was talking with someone a little earlier, and they were talking about they were afraid of slipping backward. God bless them. You don't need to be afraid of that. That's like a 13-year-old coming to her mother saying, "Mommy, I think I'm going to fail puberty. I'm not going to make it." No, doesn't mean we don't have heartache and make choices and get disappointments and all that stuff. Such is the spiritual life too. But the one thing we need to do is keep on keeping on. What is the proper use of the will? The proper use of the will is to align our will with God's will. God's will for us in the end is self-realization. Ancillary to that, to be happy, joyous, and free. That's God's will for us. So the important thing to do is to be earnest, to keep on keeping on. I am a crappy yogi. I can't tell you how many mistakes I've made, what you might call mistakes, apparently wrong turns, screw ups. But one thing I've done is I keep at it. So this is all the Lord really asks of us. And by our surrender, by our openness, letting God in our lives, as it were, we invoke the grace of God. Remember, the grace of God is always there. God is not capricious. Or going back to our image of the car batteries. our practice is getting out the wire brush and scrubbing off the crud. What is the crud? My willfulness, my fear, my need to control, my belief that it'll be better if I dominate other people. And I need specific things in the world in order to make me happy. Comes in so many forms. We forget that the mind freed from raga, craving, is the serene mind. We talk about vairagya. We usually think of it as dispassion, detachment. But the root is raga, which means passions, desire for things. Also includes its opposite, dvesha, aversion. The prefix V is a superlative. It can mean the opposite or to go beyond. So real dispassion is to go beyond the littleness of our petty ego's needs to control and dominate and manipulate, to get what I want. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Api chetsu duracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyagavya vasito hisa. Even if the most sinful worships me with devotion to none else, or with single-pointedness, he too should indeed be regarded as righteous, for he has rightly resolved.
Yes, yes. So we don't get to choose how strong our vasanas are, how negative our emotions are, how much trauma we may have. We've taken lifetimes building all those vasanas. This is our karma. This is the hand we're dealt in life. But all of us can choose abhyasa, practice. All of us can practice bhaja govindam, seeking, loving, worshiping Krishna. One of my favorite writers is the Christian saint Augustine of Hippo. And one of his most famous statements is, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. One of the most revealing things Shankara writes in Viveka Chudamani, after he does the section on the qualification of a fit student, there's the short section on the qualifications of a fit teacher. And one of the phrases is, who is calm as a fire that has burnt up its fuel. Such a lot of implication to that. Notice it doesn't say she came in pure as the driven snow and never had an evil thought in her head. It doesn't say that. It says that fire of resentment, of regret, of fear, of anger, of craving, of controlling, self-will has been burnt up. It's all been burnt up. So that's our job, burn it up. And here Krishna says, just start. Say you get discouraged or get distracted and you go for days or months or so. You don't practice. Weird thing about ignorance is the thicker it gets, the less we think of yoga as a solution to our problems. But once we get a little bit of light, a moment of clarity, start again. When our yoga comes back that we've done, oh yeah, I remember this. Abhyasa, practice, is the great key. Setting aside the time to do. My devotee soon comes to me, she says. Any thoughts on this? Sad ones are those who are loaded down with vasana, etc. And they say, oh, this is too hard, or I don't think I want it. I think I'll just take Valium or have a few glasses of wine. Or I have no problem about being resentful against my spouse. I just hit them. You know, all sorts of solutions that the ego gives us. Or what I heard this wonderful phrase, might have come from you. Amputating relationships.
Abrupt amputation of relationships.
Yes, I love that.
That's nice.
Where, you know, I have problems with another human being, so the solution is chop it off. You know. Not a particularly successful strategy.
Very mature.
I'm not speaking to someone. I've been a yogi. I don't talk to anybody anymore. Nonsense. Nonsense. Very famous story in the Christian scriptures where Jesus says, before you take your offering to the temple, you go to your enemy and you make peace with your enemy before you take your offering to the temple.
Or remove your sandals before you step on the sacred ground.
This has to do with cleaning up that stuff. Clean up that stuff before you could really offer your heart to God. I'm offering my heart to God. It's just those assholes in my life that are so problematic. Make peace with that. So every sinner has a future. Hope. It's always hope. Any thoughts about this before we go on? All right, next verse.
You
Ship-
muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Shipram bhavati dharmatma shashwachan chantim nigacchati kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Soon he becomes righteous and attains eternal peace. O Kaunteya, know for certain that my devotee is never destroyed.
Yes. So what happens if we begin to live a life of abhyasa, of practice? Well, what should I practice, Jim? Well, let's start with some of the basics. First of all, love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. That's a real good place to start. But a great list of things to practice are the qualifications of a fit student that we find in Viveka Chudamani. You can start by Viveka and Vairagya. Viveka, that firm conviction in the intellect that Brahman alone is real and the phenomenal world is unreal. It's known as discrimination between the real and the unreal. We start by saying the world is impermanent, but it gets much more subtle. Not only does everything pass, but my joy does not come from the world. It's an illusion. My joy comes from the self, from Brahman. And then the second one, Vairagya, that desire. Mind, we don't achieve it overnight. To give up all our attachments to enjoyments gained through the senses and all identification, starting from the body up to the form of Brahma, the Creator. You can just practice that. My devotee soon comes. In the end, it really boils down to Viveka and Vairagya. We can get all sophisticated about it. Should I chant this? Should I face that way? Should I do this practice, that practice? In the end, Viveka and Vairagya. You can just hang on to those two. We do it in our meditation seat. I am not the body, I am not the prana, I am not the feelings, I am not the thoughts, I am not any idea of self. Viveka, Vairagya. Any desire arises in the mind, I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. Even these ego-possessing spiritual things. I'm not meeting my spiritual goals today. Just let it go. Just let it go. And put the time in. And Krishna here says, Vedanta is the most compassionate of all religions. Nobody in the end is left behind. Everybody comes home to God. And I don't care how vulgar our minds are. Just do our best to turn our minds to the end. My devotee is never destroyed. Was reading yesterday with a friend, one of my favorite Western saints, a healer by the name of Joel Goldsmith. It was so interesting because he was sharing a personal story in this book about he was betrayed and hurt by these people. And he was angry. And he was having a hard time forgiving. And his prayer was, okay, God, I just can't do this. I want to, but I'm not able to. So you're going to have to do it through me. You can do everything. You're going to have to forgive these people. He said he went to bed and slept soundly, and he awakened in the morning, and he was healed. What did he do? Surrender to God. Any thoughts? Next verse.
Mam hi partha vyapashritya yepi syu papayonaya striyo vaishasta shudraste epi yanti param gatim. For taking refuge in me, they also who partha may be of a sinful birth. For example, women, Vaishyas as well as Shudras, even they attain the supreme goal.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
There's hope for everyone.
So, first of all, we need to understand I have never read a spiritual book that didn't have within it some of the prejudices of its cultural context. And I know a lot of people take a verse like this and they just torture the hell out of it to not make it come out sexist and racist. But it's sexist and racist. But then so's the Christian Bible, so's the Quran, so are Buddhist scriptures, so are Hebrew scriptures. All of them suffer from having been brought through the mind of human beings. So the Bhagavad Gita is part of a whole body of literature that we call Brahminical, meaning it is aimed at a particular class in India, the Brahmin class and the Kshatriyas, the warrior kings. There's history around this. There's history about either a migration or a conquest. We don't know. Some scholars are now negating that, saying that the Aryans are native to India. What were you taught, Deepa, as a kid? You're not Deepa, you're Susali. Deepa, what were you taught as a kid? Where did the Aryans come from?
The Aryans came from the north.
And migrated, or were they indigenous to the Indian subcontinent?
Oh, in the Ramayana, Ram is considered an Aryan. So by allusion, they implied that the Aryans were here by birth.
Yeah. That's debatable.
Yeah.
Especially we find that out from linguistic analysis, because Sanskrit, Prakrit, some of these ancient Indo-European languages, they come probably from a common source, Central Asia in the Caucasus Mountains someplace. Probably modern Kazakhstan or Tajikistan, somewhere around in there. Anyway, the whole point being, the people who were already in the Indian subcontinent, who were a darker skinned people, ended up being the lower caste. That's why you've got all this stuff going on about, you go to shoddy.com, match.com in India, you want oh, they have wheat colored skin. Oh, no, you don't want to get out in the sun because you'll be dark. And with that is an assumption that you're of a lower class, you see. And the lower classes were the Shudras, the laborers, the Vaishyas, the merchants. Now, it was also very sexist. It's only really been in the past 100 years where almost universally now women are permitted to study scriptures. I can remember very vividly, there was a camp up Krishnalaya that Swamiji was doing. And what we used to do in the old-timey days was hire some of the local people to work in the kitchens and do the housekeeping, change the linens in the beds and stuff like that, because there were too many people to do it with just the residential staff. And there was this one gal who was working there, and she was a Hare Krishna devotee in ISKCON. And one of the things that Swamiji always said, anybody who was there as part of the paid staff, if you wish to attend any of the talks, you could do so. There would be no charge, no nothing. You could participate fully in the camp. And she says, oh, I can't listen to the Vedanta. I'm a woman.
Wow. What was she local? Because Krishnalaya is in California, right?
It is. And she was white. But
wow.
That was the teaching she had gotten in the ISKCON tradition. Now, whether it's still that way, I don't know. But what I want you to know, Swamiji absolutely felt that this knowledge is available to everyone. Everyone. Male, female, and now I would say non-binary. And your caste is determined by, we can speak of it that way, the quality of your mind, your character, your actions, not by birth. The opposite is also true. You can take great pride that you were born a Brahmin, and you can trace your lineage back to such and such a rishi and learn Sanskrit as a kid. And if you're a boy, you get the sacred thread and stuff like that. But if you spend your life money grubbing, then you're not a Brahmin. You're a merchant. So what he's saying here, there are lots of layers that are implied. For those people who are poor, it's a paradox. Nobody thinks about money more than a poor person. There are sannyasis who take vows of non-ownership. That's different than crushing poverty. Now we have, even in this country, more and more. To a starving person, God is bread. And if your life is a miserable life because of poverty, it's very difficult to practice yoga. So if we use as our model Maslow's pyramid, what's it called, of
Hierarchy.
hierarchy of needs, yes. So if you're in survival at the bottom, it's very difficult to practice yoga. Some people do, but the vast majority of people don't. So this is one of the reasons why in India, Swamiji is known as much for hospitals and schools and microeconomies and all these things he did to raise people out of survival so that they would have the space in their lives to think about these things. So that's a deeper understanding of Shudra. In terms of Vaishyas, those are those people who are focused on cash and prizes in life. Much of America is that way. The one who dies with the most toys wins. If your mind is focused on the market, there's not usually room for it. Unless you have a crisis, then you might. I won't even go into possible symbolism about women. I won't even touch it because I think it's stupid. The point is, anyone can gain value. In the old-timey days, they wouldn't let non-Brahmins study this work. When Swamiji first came out of the Himalayas, he would be doing his jnana yajnas, his camps, to anyone who would come. The Brahmins, that he had death threats. You're taking Vedanta to the marketplace. But we don't have to have guardians at the door. Only those who have sincere hearts can even come into the room. The knowledge itself has its own guardians. And if you're ready for this particular work, you practice abhyasa. What should I practice, Jim? Start with viveka and vairagya. Meditate every day. Watch your mind. Take on the practice of sakshi bhava, the attitude of the witness. Notice what it feels like when you're under the tyranny of kama, of craving. Don't fool yourself. Don't think that you're unhappy because you don't have what you want, or unhappy because your children aren't doing what you think they should, or you're unhappy because your boss isn't behaving right, or you're unhappy because your job doesn't have purpose or meaning, or you're unhappy because you're living in the wrong place. Whatever it is, that's a lie. That's your ego lying to you. We're unhappy because we're craving. How do I deal with that? Drop it. Vairagya. Watch your mind come to peace. Desire and object of desire become one. And you're going to act that dance in the world because we've all got vasanas. Own your ananda. It's a taste of yourself. is not in the object. In the end, there's no such thing as worldly enjoyment. The world is shunyata, it's void. What it is Brahman. The only joy I experience is the mind tasting myself. But I have to hear that over and over again. And I have to watch the mind to see its dynamic, such as the power of Maya. Don't look, don't look. That's what Maya keeps saying. The answer is chocolate cake. The answer is more money. What's that network on TV? Q something, where they sell jewelry and all sorts of things.
Oh, I know. I don't know what it's called. I know what you're talking
Q
about.
network or something
QVC.
like that.
QVC.
BBC.
See, we know who watches it now.
The boys.
The men apparently.
I know of people who've spent fortunes just buying stuff. It's like a drug. I was on the phone with a dear friend who lives in Florida. And I don't know what you would call this relation. It's his son-in-law's mother, who's quite wealthy, just passed away. And she had a gorgeous apartment she owned in Palm Beach, West Palm, I think it was. Anyway, so they went in and just racks and racks of clothes, some of them with the tags still on them. And over 100 pairs of shoes. Yeah.
We obviously need 100 pairs of shoes, Jim. Come on.
I won't ask how many you have. But there's a thrill out of shopping for people. It's not much different than chocolate cake or sex or wine or whatever it is that helps us deal with vasana pressure. What does vasana pressure feel like? I'm restless. I need to fix this feeling. I've got to be doing, I've got to be doing, I've got to be doing, I've got to be getting. No blame. That's the human condition. And how do we get out of it? Viveka and Vairagya. But that's not possible without paying attention. Sakshi Bhava. So we can roll our eyes at this particular shloka. But for the people who have empty nest, your kids are gone, you're not currently in a relationship, you don't have to deal with husband or children.
Just empty.
Huh?
Just empty. I'm just empty here.
Yeah. You've got a job and hopefully you don't have to work more than 40 hours a week. There's lots of time. There's lots of time to devote to God. You're not spending all day trying to find a place to sleep. You're not spending all day wondering where your next meal is coming from. You're not spending all day worrying about whether your children are safe. You're not spending all day consumed with feeding the fire of your desires. That's the import of the verse. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Kim punar brahmana punya bhakta rajarshayasthatha anityam sukham loka mimam prapya bhajasvamam. How much more easily than the holy Brahmins and devoted royal saints.
So how much, go ahead, there's more to the verse, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because it's phrased interestingly. Anyways, I'll read what's in the parentheses as well. How much more easily than the holy Brahmins, and devoted royal saints attain the goal, having reached or obtained this impermanent and joyless world, do worship me devoutly.
So he says, if you are lucky enough to be of the class where you have leisure, where you can read. A lot of people in this world can't even read. How much easier it is when money is not a pressing issue. The fear of financial insecurity isn't foremost in your mind. So if you're born into that, don't waste the opportunity. Don't waste the opportunity. So COVID comes along, you want to do yoga, you lose your job, you get a fat supplement from unemployment from the government. You have 6, 8, 10 months, 12 months where you could be doing sadhana. And you can tell me how many complete series on Netflix you've watched and how bored you are and how much weight you've gained. Given these opportunities. But we're not a Brahmin or a royal sage. We're Vaishyas and Shudras. That's what the point is. And again, I'm not speaking about jati, what we're born into. I'm talking about qualities of. And if you've got the yearning for liberation, even if you've got a lot of responsibilities, you will make time for abhyas, for practice. Now, remember one of our ruthless rules of the mind. What you look at, you're going to think about. What you look at repeatedly, you're going to think about repeatedly. Repeated thought becomes habituated thought. Habituated thought sinks into an unconscious, becomes the law of our life. It becomes a vasana. So what we want to do is cultivate subhej, auspicious desire. How do I do it? You don't have to like it. You don't have to want it. Just do it. Read a little bit of scripture every day. Swadhyaya. Spend some time with God. If your mind is very busy and noisy, chant the name of the Lord. If you have a greater affinity to the Christian tradition, turn on some religious music. Do whatever you can do to turn your mind toward the infinite. Pray. Understand, though, as a yogi, prayer works. Anybody who says prayer doesn't work hasn't tried it enough. But for many people, their prayer doesn't work because they don't understand what prayer does. Prayer doesn't change God. Prayer changes the one who's praying. If we understand that principle, it changes how we pray. Do whatever you can to turn your mind towards
He works.
God.
He works.
It works. Yes. And all that negativity got in there through habit. How do we get it out? Tapas. Remember, tapas means heat, literally. When we change the flow of the mind from one ingrained habitual stream of thinking to a new one, a more auspicious one, the mind resists it. It's uncomfortable. It can even be painful. That is tapas. Far more efficacious than sleeping on a bed of nails or staying up all night or fasting for 3 days. Best tapas is to turn the mind towards God. But what do we want? We want a magic pill. Oh, Jim, I just have all this negative thinking. I spent all morning worrying and so fearful. Give me a mantra that will make it stop. I wish that some go away. We have to do the work. Inspire you, share with you. We can hang out together and talk about God. Talk about God with Jim. You're not worried about your problems. We have to do the work. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
This is the last verse in chapter 9.
Okay.
Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mama namaskaru mame vaishyasi yuktveva matmanam matparayana. Fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, sacrifice to me, bow down to me, having thus united your whole self with me, taking me as the supreme goal, you shall come to me.
Yes. Here he sums up all these practices that have been suggested into this one verse. If you want one verse to guide you, what you need to do. What's the practice I should do, Jim? This last verse in chapter 9 has it all. So what's the first idea?
Fix your mind on me.
Yes. Do your best to think about God all the time. That's the lower form. Aparabhyas. The lower form of practice. Parabhyas. Stay with the question, Koham, who am I? An experience happens, to whom did this experience happen? To me, who am I? Oh, that's right. Brahmasmi, I am. Next idea.
Be devoted to me.
Love God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Next idea.
Sacrifice to me.
Yes. Doesn't mean just to do puja or go to mass. It means, remember we've talked about this metaphor of the yajna, the Vedic sacrifice. Everything, make it sacred, make it sacramental. Acting in the world in the spirit of selfless sacrifice. Next idea.
Bow down to me.
Yes. Little short prayer, little short mantra. I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. Or if your Ishtadevata is the mother, I can't, she can, I think I'll let her. I was talking with a young man this morning. He's really smart, he's really competent. And he was raised in a home of alcoholics and addicts. And he was abandoned emotionally and psychologically as a child. His parents were too wrapped up in their own addictions. So what he had to do as a child was to take care of himself. He was thrown out of the house at the age of 14. And was a feral child on the streets. So he developed this strong self-will. No one's going to take care of me. I've got to do it myself. I've got to be my own advocate. I've got to struggle for my own well-being. Of course, that led him into addiction. And as we were talking this morning, these subtle forms of willfulness. I know what's best. I need to get my needs met. I know what's best for this situation. We may not be lying, cheating, and stealing like a feral teenager, but are we willful? Is there a piece inside of us that must have our own way? I know what's best. I know what's right. I know what's just. I know it's there. We have all sorts of reasons. We have righteous indignation. Oh, that's a great one. Anybody here ever use righteous indignation as a cover for self-will run riot? I can't. She can. I think I'll let her. This is what it means to bow down to Krishna. Has nothing to do with pranams in front of a statue. Has nothing to do with praying on your knees at Lent. Means to dethrone egos. What is the first proof of our willingness to let go of the self-will? Our willingness to take suggestions. That doesn't mean going to another person and say, run my life, such and such. Should I say this to so-and-so? It's not in loco parentis. It's not somebody in place of the parent. The suggestions, read the scripture. It's loaded with suggestions of how to live our lives. This is why we call Shruti first pramana, first authority, the first means of knowledge. Our willingness to do what's suggested. And all of these suggestions run against the needs of the ego. Real spirituality is always ego busting. And if we're real hung up there, we can say real spirituality is always humiliating. What is it that gets humiliating? My ego. To be little, bow down. Next idea.
Having thus united your whole self with me, taking me as the supreme goal, you shall come to me.
So when myself, my ego has disappeared into Krishna, when the only goal in my life is God consciousness, then you will come. Then you will attain samadhi. Then you will be united in yoga. All right, we finished our 9th chapter. There's a little Upanishad at the end. Will you share that with us?
Yes. Om Tat Siditi Srimad Bhagwad Gita Supanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Raja Vidya Raja Guhya Yogo Nam Navamo Dhyayah. The English for that.
You write it for
Thus in the Upanishads, the glorious Bhagavad Gita and the dialogue between, go ahead.
Thus in the Upanishads of the glorious Bhagwad Gita, in the science of the eternal, in the scripture of yoga, in the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjun, the 9th discourse ends entitled the yoga of royal knowledge and royal secret.
Rajavidya, Rajavidya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om. Now,